All right, everyone, welcome back to another Tuesday episode of the Vendetta Sports Media Daily Show. Alongside the main Miami Heat'll, Matt Hannafin, I'm Chris Bagdonis. What is going on, Matt? How are you doing, my friend?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. How about yourself?
Not too bad, another Tuesday. Can't complain about the weather. Can't complain about all this stuff going on ahead of the NBA draft. But I'll leave it to you, Matt. What's the elephant in the room you want to address?
Uh, I heard Spain won the UEFA Nations League. No. Well, I mean, there's been some big news. I mean, it's the off season. Big news happens all the time. But I mean, we could start with the Beal trade. We could start with Draymond opting out. Where do you kind of want to?
I would say I'd probably go with the Beal trade, and obviously I think your perspective with Miami, I think it's definitely worth addressing kind of right off the bat. So I'll leave it to you. What's your first impressions, takeaways from the Phoenix Suns acquiring Bradley Beal?
Well, I mean, first off, I was wrong. Uh, Not on this show specifically, but in the general sphere of things. The Beal thing was weird to me in terms of like it was first reported that it was Miami and Milwaukee were like the two teams that were like the front runners for him. There was Philly that was shot down. There was Boston that was shot down. But it was Miami, Milwaukee, and Milwaukee was kind of a weird case study because it's like I don't think they were in position. They would have had to have traded Drew. I
Right.
don't think they would have been necessarily willing to do that. The contract situation with Bradley Beal in and of itself just isn't good enough to take that in if you're a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. And Miami's been, I mean, this isn't surprising to me from like the Miami's perspective of things because they've been linked to Bradley Beal literally since January of 2019. Like this has
He
been,
went to Florida, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
like this has been, he's been linked to him forever. And it feels like most every offseason when we have these discussions about, all right, are the Wizards going to trade Bradley Beal? Well, at the forefront of those conversations, unsurprisingly, are the Miami Heat. So when this officially gets leaked, I believe it was Wednesday that they are looking to potentially swing a trade if they go in the direction of a rebuild, which, by the way, shouldn't have taken this long. They gave him the Supermax extension last offseason with the no trade clause, with the 15% trade kicker. And it's just like, with the no trade clause specifically, it's like, what he's the one guy in the league that I think has a no trade clause. And so it's just like, from that perspective alone, he gets 250 million and now he's getting all the leverage in negotiations that he wants. And to me, just on the surface at the time, it was crazy. And they should have just traded him either last offseason or not last offseason, the
Like sign and trade, yeah,
last year or the year before that. Like this is something that's been kind of the writing on the wall for Washington forever. And it's just been like they've been kind of middling towards mediocrity. I mean, they had that one season, I think it was like 2017, where they went 7 games with Boston in the second round. They unfortunately came up short. Like there's been some good seasons sporadically, but for the last 3-4 seasons, for the most part, it's been just a lot of mediocrity. It's been a lot of, oh, we're going to get to the 10 seed, or we're going to get to. I mean, they were the 8 seed a couple seasons ago. They were practically in purgatory. I
Yep.
guess that's like the best way to describe it. And then that they were hamstrung with this contract, and it's just like you were Washington was in a position to tank for Wemby, or at least try to better tank for Wemby. But instead, they give Beal the supermax contract. They they're the 8th pick, and so they're it's just complete it's complete Washington fashion how they just completely just botch this entire situation up. And so then it comes last week that they're potentially looking for a trade. Washington doesn't have leverage because, again, the no trade clause, Beal could essentially control where he wants to go, and to some extent, if he wanted to, what package he would get traded for. Um, and that's it's a rare situation because usually, again, players don't have no trade clauses. And so the fact that Washington was in this position, and then all of a sudden, I think it was either Friday or Saturday comes, and it's just like then I think it was Shams Charania who reported that it's Phoenix and Miami now. Like Phoenix is all of a sudden like made a push, and then when you look at it from that angle, it's like okay, Phoenix can only offer so much with like the Chris Paul, who's on a non-guaranteed or is on a partially guaranteed contract. And so that messes things up with like the outgoing and incoming salaries for Washington and trying to make that money match. I think they can modify that. And I think they're going to modify that as this becomes finalized. But like that complicates things. And like they and players under contract. And so like the other ones that they have, like, are they going to potentially trade DeAndre Ayton? Well, the reporting I think this weekend came out that Bradley Beal wouldn't have accepted a deal if it was DeAndre Ayton instead of Chris Paul. And so it's like now Phoenix is in this position where they could offer the Landry Shamet, Chris Paul package, like kind of headline that package. But guess what? Phoenix doesn't have any picks because they traded them all in the Kevin Durant trade. And so now you're in a situation where it's like, okay, they trade Chris Paul, who almost got waived. Landry Shamet, who's making $10 million a year, whose Suns fans wanted off their roster for God knows how long. Second round picks and pick swaps. That's the best that you can do.
Pennies on the dollar, as Trey put it, and I agree.
Pennies on the dollar. But then you look at the package that Miami could have offered or wanted to offer more, and it was like the Kyle Lowry, one of Duncan Robinson or Victor Oladipo, possibly Nikola Jovic, who I'm repping right now.
Yes, sir.
Or Haywood Highsmith. And whether it's like one pick, I know Washington was looking for 2 first-round picks if that was something that came about. Maybe there was like a pick swap in there for one of the years. Miami has pretty much 3 tradable first-round picks, including 18 this year if they want to do it. And so that's kind of where like Miami's package was better. But the thing with Washington is I don't know if I said this on Twitter, but I know I put it in the Slack, is ideally Washington would want expirings and picks. And Miami was able to offer 2 expirings. They were able to offer Kyle Lowry, who's, again, $29.7 million, I think the number is, plus Victor Oladipo, who has a $9.5 million player option. Yeah, he's probably not going to play for most of the season because of tearing his
injury.
skeleton. Yeah. But that's something that you can negotiate behind closed doors. Like you could try to talk to him and his agents about like, okay, if you accept this player option right now, we can get this deal done. I don't know if that was ever a stopping point, but that's something that Miami could have done. But then like, if it's not that, then it's the Duncan Robinson who's going to have $50 million attached to those final 3 seasons of his contract, not including this upcoming one. And obviously the Kyle Lowry, and of course the money worked with that, but it's just a matter of what did Washington desire more. And Washington desired the Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, 72 second round picks, pick swaps, poo-poo platter that they had. And it's like, from that perspective, like, I don't think Washington did a good job, but it's something they wanted with like, God knows how much cap space they're going to have within the next couple of seasons. Like, they're going to have a lot of cap space. And this is something, again, that they needed to get off of. And it's like, I guess if you're looking at it from the perspective of like, yeah, they don't want the longevity of the Duncan Robinson contract, or they don't want, I don't know, the longevity of like a Tyler Hero contract. I mean, I know he wasn't reported in the deal, but like they wouldn't want the longevity with that type of money. And obviously, again, the player option obstacle that Miami would have had to hurdle would have been, it's something, I don't know. Again, I don't know if that was a stopping point, but like, I think it, and then like, of course, it comes out after Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, who, by the way, is incredibly plugged in with the organization as well as any reporter. And not a lot of reporters are plugged in with the Heat organization in terms of like knowing what they do, like him. And he reported that like there was an unknown player that Miami wasn't willing to throw in that Washington wanted. We don't know who that is. That could be Jovic. That could be Highsmith. Those are probably my 2 guesses. I'm guessing it's probably Jovic. And again, it was the more desirable package all along. And that, again, when you're in a situation when you're trading for a player with the no trade clause, well, you would think that the player, I mean, it wasn't like Beal wasn't not going to come to Miami if it was a package that Washington desired. So after all, I think the lesson that we could take from this is Washington still did have some leverage because
Right.
they were choosing the package that they ultimately wanted in the end, regardless if it was better or not. Uh, so I think from like the Miami side of things, it ultimately sucks, and I don't know if we're gonna get much into this later, but it's like immediately after they're immediately pivoting to Damian Lillard. If you want to see what my thoughts are from that whole, if you want to unpack those worms, check out last week's episode about how I just feel about possibly trading for Damian Lillard, or just check out my Twitter because I kind of went off a bit over the weekend after that deal was done. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Phaser Gratz says, "How is the Rays season? Do you guys think the Rays will win the World Series?" I mean, they have as good a shot as anyone, but
72 games into the season.
Yeah, I mean, they have as good a shot as anyone right now, but
again, back to the Beal thing. For Phoenix, I think there's two kind of sides to this from Phoenix's perspective. I mean, let's start with the good side. Well, at Bradley Beal's best, he's better than Chris, or at Chris Paul's best, he's better than Bradley Beal's better than him at this stage of his career. Like Bradley Beal is still legit, like the contract isn't good. He's on the books for 46, 47 million this upcoming season. He has a $57 million player option in the final year of his deal. Again, not great. He's probably I could probably break the news now that he's probably gonna opt into that. Yeah. But he's still a really good basketball player, and I think that's getting taken away a little bit because of his contract. I mean, he only averaged 23 a game last year. Last year was the weird instance where they actually had a couple 20-point per game scores. I mean, yeah, Beal's still going to be the number one option.
Yeah, Kuzma and Porzingis, I remember.
Right. And like, yeah, I mean, Beal's still the number one guy on that team, but like he was able to defer a little bit more. Not that it fashioned good enough results, but they were still like he took a little bit of a step back. He also had his most efficient season last year, or at least one of his most efficient seasons. I mean, I know he had his most efficient field goal percentage season. I know he was up there in terms of like true shooting percentage for his career. I think the thing with Bradley Beal that kind of gets misconstrued a little bit is I think that he is a much better playmaker than people give him credit for, with the ball in his hands. And I think that
maybe I'll put this up
in a situation where he joins a team with Phoenix and with Kevin Booker and Kevin Durant specifically, I think eventually they'll figure it out a little bit. Like it's not doomsday for me where it's like, oh, you don't have a table setter. I mean, I think Kev and Devin have become much better playmakers throughout their career as well. It's going to take a little time to iron out, but I'm not completely out on it working to an extent. Like I think they'll still be a solid team, but this is where you unpack the other side of things. The three of those players combined are making 135 million.
Oh boy. And we also had check in last week's video is also a lot on the second apron because this is a perfect time to go over that kind of impact.
Yeah. And Bobby Mark kind of outlined like this upcoming season, it's punitive. Like the penalties are punitive. I mean, again, like you still can't, I don't think you can still sign buyout players. Again, you can't trade 7 picks you can't trade first round picks 7 years in advance. Like there's still plenty of restrictions that you have. You can't use your tax pyramid level exception, which is going to be $5 million, which would absolutely help Phoenix in this situation because they have I think 7 or 8 players who are rostered, including Isaiah Hill, or Isaiah Todd and Jordan Goodwin, who
They
were
were
there,
attached to the trade, right?
they were attached to the trade. And like you still have the DeAndre Ayton piece of things where he's making 33 million. You can still trade him in like a 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 and still get assets back. In addition to picks, possibly. But I don't know what DeAndre Ayton himself is going to net in a trade. I don't know if that's something that they're going to combine with like a Cameron Payne. Like I don't know what Phoenix is thinking in that span of in that particular instance. So I'm not gonna sit here and guess. Again, they can at least get some depth in that. But like they're definitely in a tough spot. I mean, I think they're, if you were to combine everything, I want to say I saw this from Keith Smith. Maybe I'm messing this up a little bit, but if you combine the contracts of Durant, Booker, Beal, and Ayton, it's like over 700 million for the net, like for the lifetime of their contract, or at least through like 26, 27,
Oh my
something
gosh.
ridiculous like that. I can go find it, but it's an absurd amount of money. And again, when you have the second apron, which is 179 and a half, to the luxury tax, Phoenix is going to be projected to be a second apron team, not just for this upcoming season, but for the following seasons when, again, you can't aggregate salaries for a trade. You can't send cash in a trade. You can't trade more than you're
It's not baseball.
in. Like these are the extension. These are the problems with being a second apron team. And you also look at it from a health perspective. Well, Bradley Beal has missed. He's played 150 games each of the last 3 seasons, as you can see up here.
Yep.
Kevin Durant and Devin Booker also haven't been the best bill of health over the last couple of seasons either. I mean, Booker more so than Durant in terms of like he's been more healthy. He had that. I think he had it was either last year or the year before that. He had like a groin injury. I mean, I know Durant has been battling lower body injuries, fluky or otherwise, over the last several seasons. He's going to be, I don't know what age season he's entering, but he's going to be in his mid-30s.
I can get that.
And so like, this is like, you need them to be healthy. Maybe not even just for the regular season, but you're going to need them to be healthy.
It's going to be 35, yeah. And
then, okay, age 35 season. You're going to need him to be healthy, or all of them to be healthy in the postseason and for the entire postseason. Again, as we've seen with Chris Paul, in the postseason, whether it's like a hamstring injury or whatever, like he just can't stay healthy, and that sucks because I want to see him succeed, or at least for the entire time. I want to see all of them, or I wanted to see all of them be healthy for at least a single postseason run. They're not in a position to acquire depth unless outside of the DeAndre Ayton trade. And so, one, they're really going to need to hit on
where they got one mid-level exemption.
Well, I don't know if they can use it because they're going to be a second apron team.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Because that's what Trey was saying in his video.
You're going to – I mean, right now I think they're in a position to where they could theoretically use it. Hold on. I'm going to pull up their cap. Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, they really can't use it because their active roster cap, this is all per spot rack. If assuming everything was guaranteed, they'd be at 175 million.
Wow.
So you can't use your mid-level exception if that's the case, because if you use that taxpayer mid-level, you're practically hard capping yourself with the second apron. And so I mean, if you move off of DeAndre Ayton, and he's by far the biggest contract that you're taking in, like just in terms of like aggregate salary, which I think they have to get to a certain number. I don't know what 75% of 32.5 million is, but you'd have to get in between that number if you're a team trading for DeAndre Ayton. That maybe you could relieve some salary, but again, like they're in a position to where like if they sign just minimum guys, they're going to be above the second apron, and so you really can't use your taxpayer mid level yet. I don't think you could use it at all, but at least not yet. Because again, using that would put you above 179.5 million. And so that's assuming everything's guaranteed. I don't know how that's gonna come about, but I think because I know because Cameron Payne and Jordan Goodwin aren't on fully guaranteed deals, and so that's they have a trade exception that they could use for for nearly $5 million from the Dario Saric trade.
Right.
I will preface by saying that most trade exceptions aren't used. And so because teams usually aren't able to find enough salary because they're usually pretty small, and so teams aren't usually able to find a player with that salary to fit into that. A $4.9 million trade exception feels about right. Phoenix can't use their biannual exception because that hard caps them at the 169 million hard cap of the first apron, and so that's in a like they can't use that. I don't think they'll be able to use their taxpayer at all. Really, they really can only use their trade exception if they want to, if they can find a guy in the $5 million range. And so I'm just interested to see how that takes about. But like they're going to be just pretty much. I don't know. Do they have a draft pick that I'm missing?
I was just looking here. I'll pull this up instead of the
I can't
basketball
remember if they're
reference.
like the end of the first round or not.
I don't even think they have their.
I don't think they have.
I'll put up the entire order right now. But yeah, it is madness, like you said. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah, like it's going to be just a lot. They're going to be just signing minimum guys. That's practically how it's going to go. So they don't.
Nets have their
back-to-back. It's the Brooklyn pick. Okay, all right. I didn't know if that was this year or next. Okay.
I don't think they even have a. Oh no, they're at pick 52, so maybe they can hit someone there, but no guarantees.
Yeah, no guarantees. The thing that's also nice that the new CBA allots that could help Phoenix is now you'll be able to have 3 two-way players instead of just 2.
Oh, that'll help a lot for them.
And so, like, if you could turn into the Miami Heat and just somehow hit on a couple of those two-way guys, or at least give them some run and develop them, you'll be in a much better spot. I know. It's funny because Phoenix is a team. Like, I don't remember I think I may have mentioned it here before, but there was a story that came out on ESPN. I want to say it was last year, or the year before that, about just how like much just Phoenix hates the draft and how much like James Jones is just not a draft guy. And I just think that's funny and ironic. Just again, they have to fill out their roster, and it's not through the draft, but it's going to be just a lot of like minimum guys and like guys like looking for some semblance of opportunity. Outside of their own free agents that they could possibly re-sign, like I don't know. I don't think they have the bird rights. Okay, I'm looking. They have early bird rights for Torrey Craig, Biyombo. They don't have bird rights for Damian Leokogi, Terrence Ross, TJ Warren. So it's like a lot of the guys, they're going to be on like very, very, very cheap salary. And it's not like you can go beyond and sign them to like $4 million a year or $5 million a year. Like it's a lot of just going to be probably minimum contracts if they want to come back on something like that. I'm guessing most of those guys want to hit the open market and see what they can make, whether they do get like a taxpayer mid-level somewhere else or whatever. I know that like in Torrey Craig's instance, he can make his starting salary figure for next year is probably going to be like max. It could be like 7 to 8 million. I don't know what 120% of 6.7 million is off the top of my head, but
somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what Phoenix is looking at, but like at least from like a trade, this is as good of a package as you'll ever get or that you'll ever trade, at least if that favors you for a player like Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
Because he has no trade clause. And so Phoenix absolutely hit on that. But in terms of like there's a lot of questions of like, okay, how are you going to fill out the rest of this roster? Can these guys stay healthy? Because as we've seen over the last half decade, depth matters.
Denver
And
Nuggets just at your expense won a
exactly,
championship with very good depth.
exactly. Like you got to hit on a lot of these minimum guys that you're getting about ready to sign. And again, you don't have picks other than the swaps that you traded away. And so you're likely going to be looking at like the end of the first round, and it's very hard to hit on picks at the end of the first round. The success rate isn't as high as people think. And so you have to do a really good job with this.
Austin Reeves do not grow on trees. That's what
Yeah.
we can guarantee you. They do not grow on trees.
Yeah. Like you have to, like, whether it is undrafted guys or whether it
The
is
G League market, I'm sure they'll be looking at.
they're probably looking at anything.
Yep.
At least just like, okay, what can we just get off for a minimum contract to make this work? And it's, again, we've said this before, like when you have the Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal type players, it's incredibly top heavy, but you still have to build a roster around it. I'm interested to see how they do it because I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be getting from a DeAndre Ayton in a trade. If that, I'm guessing that's just for me. To me, it's just inevitable at this point that he gets traded. Yeah. But like, I think he'll get something back. I don't know what, but and then for Washington, like, this is something that they should have done years earlier. They have new leadership, like Michael Winger is their new GM.
Tommy Shepard should have gotten this done years ago, like you said.
Yeah, like that's just like I can't necessarily fault the front office now in terms of trading him away now. I can fault them a little bit again for the package they got because it's worse than the package that the team that almost traded for him would have had. Unfortunately, but that's just the reality of the situation. They got the expirings. I still can't believe. I mean, I'm guessing they can still kind of do this technically since it's not official yet. You can still try to get a third team in there and see if you could reroute Chris Paul elsewhere. Because I know that's been like a rumor. I know the Clippers were a team that they mentioned after the trade. I don't think that's finalized yet, but like there's still maybe a way where you can reroute Chris Paul, or with maybe something else if you're Washington to get a first round pick back. I don't know. But if it's just a 2-team trade, they're not going to get any first round picks in return, at least outright. And they're just dealing with a bunch of second round picks. Yippee skippy. We saw how that worked during the trade deadline for some reason.
There's a currency.
And several pick swaps. And so it's just it's a weird trade. It's one of those, like, you kind of look at it and you're just like, okay, what exactly is Washington or Phoenix thinking in terms of like, how does this fit? What's it look like? What's the package? Oh, that's the package. But yeah, in 29 minutes, we just went over a single trade.
Yeah, but it's just like you said, like there's just so much to unpack with that trade. Like you can look at from a purely schematic way. Like you have obviously 3 volume scorers, 3 guys who can get hot quick, and Beal, Durant, and Booker. But like you said, there's so many cap implications. And like you said, what the hell are the Wizards doing? Kind of taking this poo-poo platter. Like there's a lot to unpack. And even more concerning for me as a Knicks fan is I've heard that Chris Paul is a rumor because obviously Leon Rose, before taking the Knicks job, was his agent with CAA. And so, again, that's my 2 cents. But yeah, we can
the Jalen Brunson, Chris Paul playoff backcourt.
I'd probably rather just stick a fork in my eye than watch that.
I mean, if to make you feel better, if this makes you feel better at all, I think Chris Paul would do a good enough job getting Julius Randle in his spots.
All I'll say is, I would love to see what Chris Paul can do on the Knicks as a six man. Just a guy like he's a great, one of the most accomplished mid range scorers still in the game today. Obviously, he can on the elbows. He's still great, and he can set the table for guys, whatever. But I do not want to. You saw Jalen Brunson put up 40 in the Heat's
Yeah.
closeout game on a bum ankle. Like, what? Why is there an issue? Like, come
You
on.
don't want to see him take away minutes from Emmanuel quickly.
I'd rather give Quickly 30 million a season over Chris Paul. I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Well, if it makes you feel better as well, I'm trying to compensate for this because I kind of want this to happen now that you mentioned it. If they waive Chris Paul, like if they waive
exactly on a minimum, I'm not taking his full salary. No way.
I was gonna say like he's probably gonna be like on the minimum. What if they trade Emmanuel quickly for Chris Paul? Can we get that?
I would be so mad. I would be banging my head against the wall if they did that.
No, I would too if I were.
Like the Knicks have never had a good thing going for the better part of 25, 30 years. And this is the first good thing, sustainable thing they've got going. And that's why I was thinking before we talked, if it's not the Miami Heat that end up with Zach LaVine, I would love to see the New York Knicks package RJ Barrett, Evan Fournier, and as many protected first-round picks as the Bulls want.
I don't think the Heat are in the LaVine sweepstakes yet, but I can't say that. They're not. He's not their plan A.
We could talk about. Would you rather talk about the Heat's plan A or Draymond Green's news?
I'll just quickly address the plan A. Just if you go again, check out last week's episode. That's where you're going to get most of this again, or at least last week's Tuesday episode, rather. The Heat, immediately after reports have came out from Chris Haynes, Shams Charania,
Brian Windhorst,
practically everyone, that they're more in on Damian Lillard. Again, I'm not saying I'm not a Damian Lillard hater. I would like Damian Lillard on Heat, but my biggest sticking point this entire time, and it's going to remain this way until it actually comes into fruition, is that Damian Lillard never once in his life has wanted out of Portland. And getting him to kick the door down and request a trade from the Portland Trailblazers, it's a big ask because just in general, this is probably the closest that it's gotten because, I mean, there's been reports about he doesn't want to rebuild. He doesn't want the young guys coming in. He wants to trade that number 3 pick, as we've seen the reports over the last 24 to 48 hours. I mean, they've been trying to get – I mean, rumors suggest that they're trying to trade the pick. They've talked to, like, Toronto about Pascal and OG Anunoby, the Pelicans with Zion and Brandon Ingram. Like, there's been multiple rumors out there. I don't know how true all of that is, but they've been trying to trade the number 3 pick. There's been reports that have come out that says that they're not looking, or they're not going to be able to trade the number 3 pick because they're not going to find a good enough package for it. And so if that's the case, that the rumor on the street that is that Damian Lillard would request a trade, especially if they get Brandon Miller and not Scoot Henderson. And we will talk about the draft in a little bit after this, but to me, I still have a hard time believing, because it's like we've seen this before with Damian Lillard. Like, I feel like we had a similar conversation, maybe not to this extent, but like when Shaedon Sharpe was picked, I think 7 last year.
Right.
Maybe, I mean, Damian Lillard has been thrown in heat trades since like 2018. Like,
since the dawn of time.
Like, you can go back and find like people making Damian Lillard trades in like 2018, which isn't surprising because that's just how the internet works. And that doesn't mean that they were substantial rumors or anything. But like, again, he's been on this so-called trade block for years now. And I just, again, especially if like a Scoot Henderson falls to him, which I don't know if it will, but like, I just have a hard time believing in my head that Damian Lillard is going to kick the door down and request a trade because He hasn't once ever done that, and he's said over and over and over again that he wants to remain in Portland and he wants to build in Portland. He's even said that this offseason. Again, I don't know how much of that's PR, but to me, if you say it so many times,
It's got to be true to some extent.
there's some truth to it. And so that's just where I'm at. I just don't see a world where he requests a trade until he requests a trade. And maybe he does. Maybe he ultimately does. Maybe this is the turning point for him. Maybe since he's entering his age 32, age 33 season, he's like, you know what? I want out. But then first he has to request a trade. 2, he's got to request it to Miami. Because if you look at it from a situation of him requesting a trade, well, yeah, there's going to be, not to say they're going to be all in the sweepstakes per se, but there's going to be 28 other teams looking to trade for Damian Lillard. They're going to get, Portland's going to get at least 28 calls. That's practically what I'm saying. And so, or 29 if you include Miami, but like the entire league is going to call around asking for a Damian Lillard trade. Like, okay, what are you looking for him? And Miami, yeah. I mean, Shams reported it yesterday that Miami would be towards the top of his list. Dame has said it before on the Showtime podcast, or not Showtime podcast, but on Showtime. And like, I just have a hard time believing him. Like he would need to request it to Miami because then Miami would have some leverage in the negotiations. Because Miami doesn't have a whole lot of assets to offer. Like Tyler Hero is one of the most polarizing player in the leagues. I don't know how much the Blazers value him. Duncan Robinson's I think a decent player. He's built up some value since the playoffs. But
it's a pretty hefty salary, like you said.
Hefty salary. It's a salary filler. I don't know. Like Caleb Martin's probably their most valuable asset in terms of like you want to factor in the contract. He's making, I think, $6.5 million this upcoming season, or at least around that point. He has a player option for the next season as well. So he really has 2 years left on his deal. Well, Caleb Martin is a player that Damian Lillard has raved about in the past. And so I don't think the Heat would want to trade Caleb Martin in a Damian Lillard trade when Damian Lillard has spoke highly of Caleb Martin for the last several years. I mean, I remember,
doesn't make sense. Like, yeah.
It makes sense from like an asset moving perspective, but it doesn't make sense from like a player like Damian Lillard has said. He said on the Showtime, like, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Who knows what I get traded for? Who knows what leaves and what situation I'm walking into? I mean, the Miami Heat is an organization where they're as good as anyone in the entire league at finding guys off the scraps and filling. Incredibly top heavy before with like the Big Three era, but they were pretty top heavy in 06 when they acquired Shaq. Like they've been top heavy before, and they've kind of figured it out from there. But if you're in a situation where you trade for Damian Lillard, you're trading practically everything on the table for Jimmy, like outside of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. And I mean, that's what they should do because he's Damian Lillard. He's an incredible basketball player.
And then, it's like you said, then it just turns into another Phoenix Suns situation.
Yeah. I mean, not to say I'm not opposed to that per se. I'm not, because again, I trust this organization as much as anyone to find guys off the scrap heap. And I don't think they'd have to trade every parting soul, but they would have to trade most everything.
At least half the roster, potentially.
Yeah. And the fact that they would be trading probably 3 first-round picks.
And like you said, Nikola Jovic, which is basically the value is a first-round pick there.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. And so that's pretty much what you would be trading for a Damian Lillard. And if he says, I want to get traded to Miami and only Miami, then you're in a much better situation negotiation wise. Not to say you're still going to have to give up a lot, because you are, but you're at least in a better spot instead of being in a bidding war with like against like the Brooklyn Nets, who have 11 first-round picks that they can trade, plus because the Phoenix picks that they have. I know they have a Dallas pick in there somewhere.
And the
And so,
financial flexibility of
yeah,
everything.
like I don't think they would have to trade Bridges, or they might have to. I
They
mean,
have
I
like
know
Dorian
Dame has,
Finney-Smith and all that. They have
yeah,
the
Cam
depth.
Johnson would be one. I mean, Nick Claxton, like they have some assets and some players that they could trade with all of the picks in the world for Damian Lillard if they wanted to. Now, who's to say that the Nets would all of a sudden be a contender? Like they would leave a situation in Portland just to join Brooklyn, who again with even Mikal Bridges,
They'd be a middle of the pack team in the East.
yeah, or at least that's where they'd be projected at. I mean, who knows how the season would
That's
play
right.
out, but that's how it would kind of look on the surface of things. So it's like, okay, what are you willing to do? Not just if you're Damian Lillard, but as an organization, if you do that. Um, I mean, there's teams who can offer more than Miami, and that's just my biggest worry is getting in a bidding war with these teams. And I don't think Miami would win that. And so it's like first you have to request a trade. Two, you have to make it known that you want to get traded to Miami. The thing that's happened with Miami over the last several years is they've waited for Giannis. That didn't work. He
Yeah.
signs the he signs the extension. They tried to wait for Donovan Mitchell. Well, guess what? Donovan Mitchell was on a team with Danny Ainge as their general manager. Danny Ainge isn't going to give Pat Riley anything
He's not going to pat his back.
because we all know how much they hate each other.
Oh, I remember that Pat Riley statement on Danny Age, dude. That was so hilarious.
They've waited on Kevin Durant last offseason. And guess what? Kevin Durant decided to rescind his trade request. They trade him to the Phoenix Suns at the trade deadline. And now you're going to be waiting on Damian Lillard, who among those three players has shown he's the least capable of requesting a trade.
Well, Matt, let me be like a devil's advocate here. We can stick with Lillard, but I've got to ask, if the opportunity arose, and we have heard some rumors, would you do a sign and trade with the Dallas Mavericks for Kyrie Irving?
Miami can't sign and trade for anyone because of their cap situation.
No, I
So,
mean like Dallas would obviously sign him to the contract, and then the Miami would send the salary and whatever, to make it work.
well, I mean, they could. If Miami were to acquire a player via sign and trade, they would essentially hard cap themselves. And
That's
so
true. That's yeah. Then
you
you're
can't
gonna
go over. They're at 173 million with 9 players on their roster right now. The hard cap, a threshold that you would not be able to exceed under any circumstance, is 169 million, and so they wouldn't be able to do that uh,
right.
if that were the case. So unfortunately, I don't know if I would have done it anyways.
I know Kyrie
But
Irving and Pat Riley. I feel like they may not get off to the best start.
well, the thing with I think the misconception with the Heat is they've dealt with psychos before, and them in themselves are psychopaths, maybe in somewhat of a different sense, but they are like crazy psycho people. Uh, and so I don't think taking on a personality like Kyrie Irving would be as detrimental as people would think, but uh, there's certainly still questions that you would need to answer.
Totally.
And so I don't know if I would have done it, especially for the money that Kyrie would want, but they're not eligible to right now. That's the problem.
Well, I guess it is kind of a wait and see game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like Miami's gonna have to sell off pieces, whether it is for Damian Lillard or otherwise, to at least build some flexibility to build out this roster to kind of flip the assets. I know they have questions with Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. We don't have to go into that. You can check out last week's show for that. They have the 18th pick still, which again we're probably going to hop into the draft discussion just a little bit, but they have ways to finish this roster out.
Totally.
Um, but I just don't know if waiting for Damian Lillard is the best option. We will probably know more Thursday and beyond what Damian Lillard's intentions are, depending on what they do with the number 3 pick. Again, I just don't see it happening, but that's the pessimistic side of me. That's me. I don't want to hope for something that has shown no indication of hoping for.
That's completely fair and
Um,
reasonable, I'd say.
yeah, and it's like that's where it makes the Beal thing all the more frustrating. It's like you finally have leverage in a negotiation standpoint. It's something that's within your control, and yet you're not willing to offer the extra player or the extra pick or whatever that is. Like sometimes you got to overpay, even though it's not really overpaying, but sometimes you'd have to overpay a little bit, at least compared to who you're bidding against. But that's done. That's in the past. Can't worry about that now. But I mean, the draft is in 2 days.
I was about to say, man, let me throw this up.
Do you think? Here's my question to you: do you think that it goes Victor, Scoot, Miller as the top? Like, do you think that's the in order? That you think that's the top three? How do you think that shakes out? Do you think?
It's so confusing to me because I remember seeing like there's been a lot of smoke out that the Hornets want Brandon. The Hornets are willing to pass up on Scoot to get Brandon. I understand like that would be a very crowded backcourt with LaMelo Ball and Scoot Henderson. But like I don't know. Then there's like a part of me that thinks about it of last year, everyone saying the Orlando smoke with Jabari Smith, but then they just cut right through it and take Paulo at one. And
Yeah,
like part of me is like thinking, what if this is all just a smoke screen from Charlotte and they just take Scoot and see if they can kind of build that backcourt with LaMelo somehow. And then obviously Dame at three would not be happy that Scoot's off the board. So, it would just be a whole ripple effect. But as of right now, I'm gonna say it would be Victor Scoot Brandon.
I agree. I agree. I think that's ultimately what they're going to deal with. From what I've read and from what I've heard, like Scoot has just killed it and worked like just
Oh
every
yeah,
he's
yep.
been in. Uh, and so I think that something like that matters. Uh, I still think Brandon Miller's a good prospect. There's some questions to answer about how much he can create for himself, the separation he's able to get off the dribble,
And
stuff
obviously
like
there's
that.
some off the
The
court stuff with him
defense.
too.
Yeah, there's the off the court baggage that if it's not resolved already, will have to be resolved at some point. Um, but I think they do go. Victor, Scoot, Miller is the top three. Again, I don't know if Portland's the number three.
That's true.
Um, I also will say this because I've said this to people before. Excuse me. I've said this to people before. Every single year it feels like the draft. There's a lot of like trade smoke about like
Oh yeah,
players are gonna they're gonna teams are gonna team X is gonna trade this pick,
they're
team Y is
interested
gonna
in
trade
this
this
guy.
pick, and
Like
it's usually ends up being like they just don't. And so I'd say don't be surprised if the number three pick isn't traded. And so that's just all I'm gonna say. Or don't be surprised if the number three pick isn't gonna be traded. I mean, um, that's just again, and of course, if that happens, the Damian Lillard situation, whatever, we just went over that. But it just feels like every single season. I mean, I know Shams he said it yesterday on McAfee. Like this is like the most that he's heard buzz around like teams trading picks, whether it's like into the top five or whatever. And it's just like I feel like we say that every
yeah,
year before every draft.
buzz
Like
is just such a
this is
misleading word.
this is the most buzz that I've heard, and it's just like okay, but no team's made a trade
I can
eventually.
make a Twitter account, buy a blue check, and like put all any sort of BS I want. Like and that's
Well, I mean,
fine.
I'm not.
I'm not trying to discredit any journalist, anyone doing their
Yeah,
job, but
I'm not doubting Shams' credibility, but I'm just saying like we say that every year with like when it comes to the draft, it's just like because it just feels like teams don't pull the trigger in the end. Maybe I'm wrong this year in terms of like NBA the NBA draft. I'm excited. I'm interested to see how this all unfolds, but I do think it's Victor, Scoot, Miller.
and then the Thompsons.
The draft really starts after that. Whether they go the Thompsons, whether they go Cam Whitmore, who's an enticing prospect because of his athleticism. I know Jarris Walker, at least very early in the pre-draft process, was kind of that fourth, fifth guy. He's kind of fallen out of that top five a little bit. Can you pull up the mock draft just to see where
Yes. Let's
they
see.
have them going? I'm just interested. I mean, okay, they have Amin Thompson going 4.
They do have Whitmore jumping up.
They have Whitmore at 5. I think we had that in our side draft. I think that's kind of like the place that a lot of people have pinned him to. He's a very enticing athletic wing, uh, freshman, very good offensive player. Uh, I've heard I've kind of heard a flip flop in terms of like the Thompson. I've heard Asar has kind of surged up above Amen, but I don't know again how true that is. Uh, Again, Jarris Walker is again kind of falling out of that top 5, top 6. I think Indiana would be a very good spot for him. I think Indiana. I know Indiana's been a team that's had a lot of like we might trade back, and I don't think they should because there's plenty of players that I would take at that 7-8 spot, or that not 7-8 spot, that 7 spot. Like I think a Walker would be very like good kind of defensive minded forward, the defensive minded wing that
Interesting
could,
backcourt with him and Miles Turner, I'd say,
yeah, like that he's a very
or front court.
there's a little bit of like questions about like his how he's going to fare offensively at the next level, at least to begin his rookie career. I mean, he was a lot of it was a lot of he wasn't a good self creator, but like defensively, Walker has as good of a motor as anyone in this class. He can switch 1 through 4, 1 through 5. He's built like a linebacker, like he's 6'7", 250. That's a pretty good illustration of like just how muscular he is. So I think he'd be an enticing prospect. I know Taylor Hendricks is a good 3-and-D prospect out of UCF. Anthony Black, who I'm a big personal fan of. I don't know how great he would fit in Indiana because they have Tyrese Halliburton, but he's still a prospect that I would be thrilled to take if I'm a team like Washington or if I'm a team like Utah.
Yeah.
Derek Lively's 10 here. That's interesting to me. He's probably one of the few prospects that has what's the word I'm looking for? Like end to end, like the biggest. He might go in the top 10, but he could also fall outside the top 20.
Some
Like
boomer bust.
not boomer, but there's a word there's like a word
Volatile.
I guess, but like there's a wide range that he can get selected in. That's kind of like what I'm saying. And he's he's probably the best big in the class outside of Wembanyama.
Right.
7'1", 7'7" wingspan. Kind of had an uneven season at Duke, but he's phenomenal shot blocker. He averaged nearly 5 blocks per I think 36 per 40 minutes. Like he was phenomenal, and he's incredibly athletic. He's a very good vertical spacer, and so like
someone a type of profile that Dallas desperately needs there.
Yeah, and so like him at 10 like wouldn't be the worst idea. Of course, Grady Dick, people will make all the jokes, but very good shooter. He's someone who I would consider at 7 if I'm Indiana. Like the guy who's kind of risen up lately is Bilal Coulibaly, who was Victor's teammate. His shot's still going to be coming along, but like if you just want to talk about raw athleticism and length, I mean he's 6'8" with like a 7'3" wingspan, 7'4" wingspan, like just insane length. He has been definitely someone who's risen up just because of like the raw potential. I mean, he didn't get a lot of on-ball reps when he played with Victor, but that's because you're playing with Victor Wembanyama. But he's, again, like another one of those like late risers that you would consider if you're a team like Washington or a team like Anthony, or not Anthony. I was going to say team like Anthony Black. No, if you're a team like Utah or Dallas, that you're just for the upside that you're looking at in that kind of top 10 range. So there's players that they can look at. Or those kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 I mean, Case and Wallace, I'm a big fan of. He's a very good defensive-minded point guard. Kobe Buffkin may not have much of a weakness. I mean, very good slasher, very good decision maker. He was very, very strong point of attack defender at Michigan. Lefty, can shoot the ball well. Jordan Hawkins, the best movement shooter, I think, in this class.
Totally.
Just an absolute sniper from anywhere on the floor. It's not big, he needs to put on weight. And needs to improve around the rim. Doesn't have a great touch around there, but I think he's a sneaky good defender. His shooting ability is just unmatched as a whole in this class. I won't say unmatched. That's a pretty.
I mean, he was one of the reasons UConn won it all this year.
Yeah, Keontae George, the dude who'll just get him up, and he's just a bucket getter. Just gets buckets. Bryce Sensabaugh, same thing, is just a very good shot maker, not very athletic. Nick Smith Jr., who they have going to Miami, dealt with some knee injuries, but very good touch within 15 feet of the basket. Wasn't the most efficient player, not the best playmaker. He's smaller than you would like, but he still has a high ceiling with again, he dealt with knee injuries coming out, and I don't know how much. He was a 5-star recruit. And he was also very, very well coached from my guy, Eric Musselman at Arkansas. And so he's certainly a player that you could consider within this kind of lottery. I mean, I think his stock is going to get hit a little bit because of those knee injuries, and people just have questions like, all right, how efficient are you going to be at the next level? How good of a defender are you going to be? There's flashes there, but it's not consistent.
Right.
And so that's the issue. And then like Leonard Miller, who I think has like another guy with like a very big wingspan, kind of moves in a weird way, has a very weird shot form, but he's much stronger than his 213-pound frame would indicate for someone of his size. He's really good at getting to his spots, and he's really good at slashing. He's a very enticing defender and guy who can switch around 2 through 4, 2 through 5. I apologize. But like he played in the G League. He averaged 21 and 12, as you could see on the screen here. I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino, who I had Miami picking in our site mock draft, like a little bit of a questionable decision maker and spot up shooter at times, but he was very good in the pick and roll. He's a very good playmaker. He showed flashes as a defender. I don't know if the team like Houston would be the best one for him, but
already a pretty crowded backcourt there. So I'm
like I'm not going to go through every prospect, but like it's my point is it's like there's definitely upside with a lot of these guys. I mean, the guy who I like the most for Miami, or probably the most for Miami, I still not including like the top of the draft. But a guy who I love at Miami is going 29 on this list, Olivier Maxence Prosper, who I mentioned last week.
Yep.
If you want to talk about a guy with an elite motor, a guy who can legitimately switch 1 through 5 on a defensive end, like 6'7" without shoes, a 7'2" wingspan, 7'1", 7'2" wingspan. His shot came along a lot. He was a guy who he is working out with like every team because he wants to prove himself and he wants to show teams like how good he is. He was remarkably impressive at the combine in the one game that he played. He had 21 and 7. He an incredibly fluid athlete. Like he takes long strides. He's 6'7", 6'8", but he seriously moves in transition in open space like he's a 6'3", 6'4" guard. Like he is a fast as hell.
He's a specimen.
Yeah, and it's like when you're that good defensively, when he improved his shot. He was around, I think, the mid-30s last year in terms of like 3-point shooting percentage. It was a lot of it was from like the corners, and he showed he showed some above the break stuff as well. But in terms of a player that is that good defensively, can defend practically every position except like very big fives, who's that good of an athlete, a guy who can just grab and go and help you in transition, a guy who's a good decision maker and is willing to make the extra pass, whose handle is coming along more so now than it was when he was at Marquette. Like, this is a guy, if you're getting him at 29,
You're going to be happy.
I mean, I'm higher on him. I think Miami. He's one of my top guys for Miami.
I mean, I could see the Heat trading back into the low 20s, mid 20s,
maybe,
kind
and
of
if they
snatching him
do,
up.
and if he's still there, this is a guy that you should consider taking. But like, there's plenty of good players in this class that I'm very excited to see how this all shakes out once Thursday comes. But just in terms of like the top, I think that I think it goes Victor, Scoot, Brandon, and just really the draft starts after that point, in my opinion.
I'm totally with you. I'm with you there. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and like we said in the Slack, I definitely want to hop on and get some live reactions with the rest of the NBA team.
If Miami does something, I'll have to hop off for a little bit for
if something stupid, to blow off.
No, it's just I have other stuff that I would have to take care of.
Oh yes, yeah.
If Miami did do something, whether it's like a trade or they did make a pick or whatever the case is, I would have to hop off. But yeah, no, I'm definitely planning on being on the draft streaming with a bag of popcorn and whatever, and see what goes on, because I don't know what to expect, at least outside of that top three.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of the draft. Every single season, something weird happens, and someone's just like you don't expect a team to make a certain pick or whatever, or take a player, and it's just like, I also will say, like, we have these big boards and these mock drafts that we can all look at and speculate who's going to fall where, but certain teams feel a way about certain guys that we just don't, because they've seen them, they've had them in their building, they see some sort of potential that maybe we don't see.
It's just not available to us.
And so, like, then this will change even between now and when the draft starts on Thursday. Like, minds change, thought processes change with certain things. I mean, yeah, you have like probably a group of guys that you would want, but like, who knows who falls? Who knows? There's going to be maybe a couple of guys where it's just like, okay, it's like the 15th pick, and it's just like, wait, why hasn't he been taken yet? And
it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's just how it works. So I'm excited to look forward to it.
I'm totally looking forward to it. And I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but to those of you who haven't read the articles, read the articles. Kind of the last little piece of information was that Draymond Green is opted out of his player option with the Warriors for next year. The Warriors' new GM has already come out and said he really wants him to be there, obviously. And I speculated in my post it could be maybe the Lakers, maybe even the Clippers could kind of come out of left field, but I really don't know where else besides the Warriors. Like,
I think he's going back to Golden State.
Yeah.
I just think he's going to re-sign for less.
Exactly. That's the thing. Because the Warriors have been record-setting in their cap circumvention, their cap spending. So
it might be a situation where Draymond waits a little while and see what the market offers him, and like sees moves that are made throughout the league before making a decision.
He's definitely that kind of strategic,
Yeah, like if Golden State decides to move off from like Clay or Poole or whatever,
or Wiggins, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Wiggins is a free agent also, right?
I think so. I can't remember, but regardless, he can look to see like what the market dictates for him and see who moves where.
Right.
And then kind of go from there. But I think in the end game, it's either Golden State or the Lakers.
I'm with you there.
Unless, again, a new suitor could emerge. I don't know.
Again, that's the beauty of the NBA, is that we think we have it all figured out, but then there's always a curveball. There's always something out of the blue that will take the entire NBA community for a loop. But Matt, any closing thoughts on this daily show?
Well, we didn't take our medicine with Yankees socks.
I know. Well, the wheels are falling off with the Yankees. That's all I can say.
I think you're more down on them than I am, but I'm still not happy.
I mean, the only good thing we can say is that they have a very good bullpen. But again, when your starting pitchers
Yeah.
aren't healthy, it doesn't really mean much.
I mean, Clark has been better, uh, but none of this matters if you can't score runs.
No.
And I say that it's a weird thing because it's like you look at it and they're still fifth in the AL in runs scored. So I think there's some perspective
Makes
that we
no
have to take
sense.
into
Yeah,
this.
like
But like since Judge has gone out, like this has been a thing for the last it's not even just the season, but the last 2-3 seasons, or like every time Judge is in the lineup, it just feels like it crumbles. And
yep.
I don't
Stanton
know.
is so much better with Judge in the lineup.
I
That's
don't think
something
you
we've
could pick at
noticed.
one certain thing because it's like when DJ, Rizzo, Stanton are all in massive slumps, or at least it feels like they're all in massive slumps for the better part of this stretch. And really, the only two guys you're getting somewhat of a production out of is Billy McKinney, who. Well, I can't remember. Did he start the season in AAA or was he signed to the 40 man
Yeah, I think he started the
beforehand? I
season
don't
in
remember.
AAA.
I
I
don't
remember he
remember
started his
exactly.
career with the Yankees back in
Yeah, he did.
2018, but he just has cycled
He did.
around and he's made his way back to the Bronx.
And then Gleyber Torres, who he's been a practically league average hitter over this stretch, over this 2-week stretch. When you're not getting much else from, or at least consistent production elsewhere, you're going to be in a bad spot. And that's why the Yankees have been one of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense in baseball in the month of June.
Yep.
Like that's ultimately the case. And it's like, I also look at it from the perspective of like, I didn't think this team would be a contender just because of like, we had so many questions at the end of last year. I didn't think they were all of a sudden going to be a contender this year. It's weird because they still hold the third and final wild card spot. And so it's not like complete doomsday scenario, but it's still not good. They still haven't been like a good team at all.
I mean, it just kind of is a testimonial to just how great Judge is. Like he affects the three batters before him, he affects the three batters after us.
That's the beauty
like,
of him having him in like lineup protection. Like lineup protection, like that stuff matters. Like where guys are slotted in the order. But again, like you can't have Judge being out and simultaneous slumps from
all the supporting cast, yeah,
because that's ultimately not going to help you at all. Like Domingo got lit up against Boston. I remember if it was Friday or Sunday.
Yeah, it was Friday, I think.
But he, for the most part, has been decent this season. And I'm not much of a Domingo guy, but he's been decent this season.
And now we see
Mark has been much better lately than he was to start the season, especially against left-handed hitters. I mean, there's still struggles that he has in there.
Rodon's going to get some starts in Double-A now, and his returns is starting to get closer and closer.
Cole has regressed a little bit from his early season start, but he's still been a fairly good pitcher this season.
Still, I'd say top 15, maybe top 10 pitcher in
both
AL and National League.
Their bullpen has been lights, as you mentioned, has been like
Clay. I can't say a bad thing about Clay Holmes is that he's starting to look more like the Clay Holmes from the first half of last year that was just dominant.
But when the offense is getting you 2-3 runs a game, if that, you're not helping yourself.
No. And now it leads us to having the conversation we're having now. Like,
yeah. And it's like, it feels like every other time we talk about this, they either go on a hot streak or a cold streak. Maybe it's the start of a hot streak. I mean, I know they have, I think 3 against Seattle and then 4 against Texas. And then they go to Oakland. But
so,
like, I don't know. I mean, Seattle's kind of been middling a little bit throughout.
Yeah, it's true. They have a strikeout problem.
They have a strikeout problem, but there's been certain times where their offense is heated up. I mean, I know they'll face the Kirby Castillo. There's someone
oh yeah.
Like I know they face Kirby and Castillo these first couple of days.
It'll be a good test to see if these bats can come to life.
I mean, especially against Castillo, who's been.
And I think maybe awesome. Bader's coming back, which I think will be a huge boost for this team. Is Bader?
Cool. doesn't really help offensively.
I mean,
He's shown moments, but that doesn't
exactly. Like the playoffs last year is probably the best baseball he'll ever play in his career.
Yeah, he was their best hitter.
Yeah.
But like losing what is it, 5 of 6 to Boston over these last couple of weekends?
Losing one to the Mets, losing the White Sox, almost swept them. Like,
yeah,
it's getting ugly. It's getting ugly quick. And then, I mean, I just don't know how much of it is an indictment on Cashman, because you could have had Bryce Harper instead of Aaron Hicks way back when. You could have had Manny Machado instead of IKF. You could have had Sean Murphy instead of Jose Trevino. Like, how much of it is on these guys
about
and
the
how
Sean
much?
Murphy thing, but the other two, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of grasping at straws here, but like,
I just think it's. I don't want to put as much blame on it as Judge. Not blame, but I just think it's just because Judge isn't. I like Judge is a guy who makes everyone around him better for some reason. Like, I don't. It seems so simple and so dumb and so rudimentary that I'm saying that, but I really do think like these guys aren't as big of a slumps as they are if Judge is in the lineup.
I mean, I also agree with that, because just
and I don't know,
every pitcher in the
that
game
doesn't make
is
sense because they still have to hit at the end of the day, but.
You could just feel much more confident, much more at ease when you know that Judge is going to be hitting either before or just hit the home run after you.
Yeah. And it's like we've seen the lack of offense before. Like to counter argument myself, like the second half of last year when Judge was in the lineup, the offense was still brutal, and it was really Judge that was just carrying them along. And like at some point, they got to do something about Josh Donaldson.
Yep. At least like his contract is out after this year. It's the only good thing.
You got to DFA him at some point, right?
Call up Peraza, for crying out loud.
Right.
The guy's just killing it in AAA.
Right. Like, I know we talked about in the Slack about like sending down Volpe. I don't know if I would send down Volpe. I would just DFA Donaldson and bring up Peraza. Like, that's what I would do I would keep Volpe in the lineup and at least call it Peraza, because at some point Peraza deserves. I mean, I know he struggled a little bit at the Major League Baseball level in the past, but it looks like he's found something.
He's earned another chance, I think.
Yeah, he's definitely earned another chance without a question. And he's a really good defender, and so you could play him at second, short, or third if you want him to. And so you're in a position where you could do that.
Maybe throw Stanton out in right field, have DJ BH, and then kind of see if you can get something going.
Right. And so that's where I'm like, at some point you have to figure that out. At some point you have to at least acquire another outfielder or two.
Oh yeah.
At the trade deadline. Like what they did with Benintendi last year.
Yep. Maybe you got another arm or two. Like,
yeah, like you at some point, I mean, again, these trades aren't going to happen now. I think
the Yankees need to make sure things don't completely fall apart.
Yeah.
Like, we need to make sure they're still in a playoff spot by that time.
They still are, which, again, that's not the expectation for this team because of how high of a pedigree this organization has. I mean, just making the playoffs isn't good enough for this team, or at least for the fan base.
I mean, since 2009, it's
because of the expectation, but at the same time, like, they're still in the third and final wild card spot. They could still make the playoffs again. It looks like they're probably not going to win the division, unfortunately, because the Tampa Bay Rays are, I think, 11.5 or 12.5.
Yeah, like these like the people that were commenting. Now we can say that the Rays have a very, very good chance at winning the World Series.
You still got to get there.
That's true.
Still have to get to that point, because really anything in playoff baseball can happen, as we've seen before.
That's the beauty of it. But
fair. The offense right now hasn't shown any indication, at least of late, to warrant love, But like I don't know how much you've been paying attention league wide or just baseball wide, but like the Giants have won 7 straight. They've won 40 games.
The Oakland A's were just on a huge winning streak not that long.
Oakland A's have won 7 straight, and they're now I still think they have the worst record in baseball, but not by a lot, because the Royals right there with them. Like the Cincinnati Reds, won 9 straight games, and they're 10.
And Joey Votto just came back into the lineup.
Yeah, like the Phillies, I think, heading into yesterday, they've won like 13 of 15 or 14 of 16, something like that. Like they're finally, like they're sneakily becoming one of the best teams in the NL. Like the Dodgers are. I don't know if you've looked at the standings. The Dodgers are third place in the NL West.
Yeah, I mean,
The
shout
Giants
out
overtaking
Corbin
them, and
Carroll
then
and the Diamondbacks.
the Diamondbacks are like 4.5 ahead of the Dodgers for the lead in the NL West. Like it's just insane how things can turn. Not to say the Yankees are all of a sudden just going to be at the top of the division in a couple months, because I don't think they are. But we don't know how much this is going to change things. I think they're only like 5 or 5.5 back of Baltimore. It's not a big gap, but I didn't expect that heading into the season. I expected Baltimore to be like a good team, but I didn't expect them to be 5.5 games better than the Yankees 70 games into the season. And so, I mean,
stranger things have happened. That's the thing with the MLB sometimes.
Right. Like that's kind of like my point in all this. It's like things can turn quickly. You just have to get on a hot streak. Again, nothing lately has shown that the Yankees can get on a hot streak anytime soon. But again, they do face Oakland next week.
So hopefully that can.
So
maybe that can kickstart something. But
but like looking at it right now, I'm trying to see if there's any like the Angels. The Angels are now second place in the AL.
I watched the Mets smoked the Astros yesterday.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
Yeah, but by the way, the Astros have now lost 5 straight. So, like, baseball's weird. The Miami Marlins are 11 games above 500.
Luis Arias is back up to 400.
He's back up to 400. Jorge Soler and Brian De La Cruz and just all those fun young players over in Miami. They're doing the thing. They're doing the thing.
South Florida just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
They're only 4.5 back of the Atlanta Braves, which if you were to told me that beginning of the season, I would be like, what?
I'd laugh.
The Braves are the Braves fourth or the Braves third in the NL East? Like, what's going on here?
I know.
The Cincinnati Reds are now atop of the NL Central.
NL Central. Well, that division is. I mean, first it was the Pirates, and now we're here with the Reds.
Taking a considerable
slide. The Pirates, yeah. What have they lost? 8 straight now. 7 straight.
7 straight.
Yeah.
7 straight, and I think they've gone like 14-28 or 14-29 over their last.
Yeah.
42.
Not a good stretch.
Something like that.
After their hot start.
The St. Louis Cardinals are still bad. God,
hey, at least they got 2 out of 3 against the Mets over the weekend.
And they won yesterday against the Nats. But baseball's weird. That's all. That's what I'm going to end with.
I think and I'm with you. I think you can't. That's my connection's starting to fade out, but I'm gonna close it out because my Wi-Fi is giving up on me. But everyone, stay tuned. The draft is Thursday. Baseball is here to stay for the summer, and everyone have a great Tuesday, and